Dave coming to you today from the E-Shed, where I'm spending a little bit of time between trips and trying to get some editing done and some stuff out of the way. Today's video is a little bit different than ones I've done in the past on this channel. This one is actually an interview with an 86-year-old maker, a machinist, an amazing gentleman who has had several careers, and a couple of which he'll talk about in this video. My intention in doing this interview with this gentleman was to really talk to him about kind of the pathways for young people to get into the trades, get into the skilled crafts and the industrial arts and so on. However, we ended up straying quite a bit from that, as is wont to happen. Charlie Davis, the gentleman I'm interviewing, has had a very interesting career, and we talked about his career in the past for a while, and semi-retired at 86, just semi-retired, and a great resource for many people. But I'm especially thankful for the advice and for the teaching that he's done for me. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Charlie Davis. Well, so today I'm really fortunate to be able to interview someone who's been in the trades for a really long time, who's incredible machinist, probably a genius, I suspect, has had an amazing career, has had at least 3 careers, I think. And Charlie, do you mind if I tell people how old you are?
Oh, right.
Charlie, you're 87 years old, is that right?
86.
86. Yeah. My apologies.
No problem.
Every year counts when,
yeah, absolutely.
when you're old like us. So
yeah.
Nonetheless, even though most people would be hanging out at home watching silly YouTube cat videos, Charlie comes to work every day and works in this awesome machine shop here and builds amazing products for all sorts of people. Just a really awesome individual. So Charlie, let's talk about your background a little bit. How did you get into this world of working on machine tool projects and things like that?
Well, it goes a long ways back.
Yes, sir.
I grew up in New York, went to some sort of a school that was called MCHS, and we didn't have metalworking equipment. We had woodworking equipment, and I got hooked up into that. But what happened was I met up with a friend of mine who we used to be. His father was at an automobile shop, and I wanted to be a mechanic, but that didn't work out. But the guy's father was, and this was back in 1955, his father was a personnel manager for IBM. And to be honest with you, when he told me what he was doing and asked me to come in and put in for an application at IBM, and I asked him, I said, "What's IBM?" And this was up in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Yes, sir.
So to get started, me and his son was pretty good friends, so he gave me his card, and out of courtesy and respect, I told me to come down and see him. And I went down to see him, and I went in and talked to him. And at that time, IBM was just getting started up there. And I went to where he told me to go, and we walked in there, and I talked to the little girl that was in there. I was on the desk, and she was his secretary, and I told her I was down to see Mr. Edmonds. But to make a long story short, we met, and I talked to him, and then he says, "Okay," but he gave me a application to fill out, and I did. And he says, "Well, come back and talk to one of the guys, the managers." I said, "Okay, fine." So I came back that night to talk to one of his managers, and it was okay. So nothing happened for about maybe, I'd say about 6 weeks. And where I was living, there was people there, and 2 guys with suits on came and was asking questions about me.
Doing a background check.
Yeah. Come to find out, they were from the government. Because what was happening was they were getting ready to build another section to the building, and they were getting ready to make parts for the Air Force. So anyway, make a long story short, I got hired, and I went to work for him, and I was hanging parts on a paint line, and I didn't like that. But old man Watson, that's what we called him, Thomas Watson, said if anybody see anything out on the floor that they want to do, he had to give him a chance at it. So I was hanging these parts, and I'm not very tall, and they put me with this guy by the name of George Wheeler. I remember his, just like yesterday, and he was about 6'3".
Yeah.
And he had one end of the casting, I had the other casting, and I was hanging it on there, and I had all the weight. I said, oh man, I can't handle this. So I asked to go out, and in another department, and they had to give me a chance, so they gave me a chance. I went out there, got into that department. But to make the story short, I don't want to take up a lot of your time. To make the story short, I moved out of there and I moved into a drill press. Well, while I was in the drill press, I got called in the service. Well, I didn't want to go in as an RA, so I said, well, shoot, I don't want to go in the service. So I enlisted in the reserves. Did that for about 3 months, and I said, oh man, I don't like this. So then I turned and went into RA, regular Army.
Yes, sir. And you were a paratrooper.
Yeah, well, this was before. I just went in the regular Army.
Yes,
and
sir. Went
through basic training and went down to Fort Benning. And they said, let's go airborne. I said, not me. I ain't jumping on nobody's airplane. So anyway, we got shipped off to Fort Benning. We got down there. We're going to go to paratrooper school. They didn't have a school starting for about 3 months. So they shipped us back to Fort Bragg. And 2 weeks later, we started paratroop training. 2 guys flunked out, and me and another guy made it. So that's how I got hooked up as a paratrooper.
And how many jumps did you make in your career?
Did all my qualifying jumps. Jumped C-124s, jumped C-130s. And I had 27 jumps by the time I got out. I came back, and I went back to IBM after I got out. Went back to IBM, and they had an apprentice tool and model making program going, starting out. So I applied for that. I got accepted. And I went through the IBM apprentice program, 6,000 hours, 3 years.
Wow.
Came out of there as a not as a tool maker, but as an assistant tool maker. And then you had to put so many hours on the floor before you could be a tool maker. I did that. And I went through CNCs, which was nothing but little small things, not like they are today.
No.
And had a Cincinnati's, and then I got trained on a jig grinder, which ground holes on tapers or straight, whatever you want them to do. And they worked pretty good. So then I got moved into the toolmaker's rank, which was one of those things. I trained with them guys, and then became a first class toolmaker.
Nice.
Well, to make a long story short, then I moved on up the ranks. But my really, really interesting thing was they had a program which they were trying to design these little letters on your checks.
The magnetic ink letters.
Yeah. So this guy by the name of Ingehart. We call him Vendor Jingasol. We named him that. He was in that meeting and he says, well, wait a minute. He says, I think we can do this. So they said to him, you got it. He says, take whoever you want. You can have 5 guys. Whoever you want. He says, and you develop it. And he picked me, one of the guys. And we did. We developed it. It took a long time, but we developed it. And that's that letter, that whole thing.
Magnetic strip, those funny looking letters at the bottom of a check, yeah.
Yep. So I did that. And then I left there because During the time, my boy was moving up the ranks, and he became plant manager.
At IBM.
Then me, my wife, and my daughter had to leave that plant and go to an East Fishkill plant.
Because of nepotism.
Nepotism, right. We developed a department where we would take the chips that failed, because they were making the little chips at that particular time. I got some home, if I remember, I'll bring them and show them to you. They were making the little chips, right? So the chips were failing.
Mm-hmm.
So Raj, we set up this department where we developed a way to unlayer these chips to send back to the engineers, told them what was wrong with it, and they would fix it. And we did that.
So these were potted in plastic or something
Yeah,
like that, and you were able to scrape the plastic off, grind the plastic off?
No, we had 7 women, 2 guys, myself. And we came up with these machines where it was in the slurry.
Yes, sir.
And the girls, you just taking the rubber, right, and the plastic, get it down to the where you could see where the wiring was in it. And we did that. Figured that out. It worked out pretty good.
And so they were using that basically for kind of troubleshooting where the problems were?
Yeah, that's what we were doing.
Did they actually fix those chips and put them back on the line?
They fixed them.
Really?
They fixed them.
Because in those days, one of those chips
and they changed the program so that they wouldn't happen again.
Yes, sir.
So that's what we did.
Yeah.
I became the manager for that department. And I was the manager there for about 4 years. Department. But that's basically kind of what my background is as far as machining. And I learned to run all kinds of machines.
Yes, sir.
Jig bores, jig grinders, Sheffield form grinders, which they never, I've only seen one. And that was with IBM.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to build dies, jigs, fixtures, and stuff like that.
How does that?
So, and then we went. They built a plant out in Boulder, Colorado, and me and 4 other guys went out there to help them set that plant up. And I stayed out there for about 9 months.
Well,
and my wife said, either you come home or you stay out there. But anyway,
I've heard similar things said to me, so I understand that. Well, let me ask you about the people you worked with back in those days. Now you came from you didn't go through college, university, anything like that. You learned on the job. You learned through an apprenticeship program.
I took a few courses in the community college.
Yes, sir.
But I didn't graduate for anything. I just took a few courses up there.
And yet you moved up pretty high in the ranks of your company.
Yep.
And were your fellow employees who are doing similar things? Did they come from similar backgrounds, or did they come out of vocational schools? Did they come out of colleges? What was that like back then?
There was 2 other guys who were tool and model makers that moved up into the rank of management. Mm-hmm. All the other top management. But most of the guys were kind of programs from the apprentice school that I worked with that got a break to move up the ladder.
And these days, I know, being the father of children who went through the public education system here in this state, when they went through school, the idea of somebody moving into a vocational, into a skilled trade was something that the schools didn't even consider. They wanted every kid to graduate from their program and go into college or university, because that's how they measured success. Do you think that vocational programs are the answer, or do you think that apprenticeship programs are the answer? What kind of advice do you have for young people that are interested in trying to do something different than going to college and getting a desk job?
Well, number one, my take is that you have to have a good yen to want to do this kind of work, because if you can't think ahead, then you're going to wind up in a lot of trouble.
Yes, sir.
So if they go to vocational school, I think basically they'll at least want to know which way they want to go in it, whether they want to go as one particular machine, or a good feeling for all the machines, which is rare to find anymore.
It is, because people are so specialized.
Yeah. And now most most kids, I think, all they want to do now is learn how to program and stick a piece of material in the machine and press a button, send it to the program, and have the program do the work.
Yes, sir.
But that's not, to be honest with you, I don't really think that's machining.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
That's not the skill.
Yeah. Now,
the skill in that is their programming, yes.
Yes. And when you do a piece on that milling machine behind you, or another one of the lathe or something here, you've already architected out what the piece is going to look like. Every cut you have to make, you've got the machine set up for the right. You've got it measured with it, you've got the DRO set up, and you've figured out which tools you're going to use, and you've already got a set of steps in your head or maybe on paper to make that piece.
You have to have a plan in mind when you get started, because if you don't have a plan in mind when you get started, you're going to run into a lot of troubles, a lot of problems. Because the thing of it is that when you leave one operation, you got to go to another operation, and if the first operation is bad, all the rest of the operations are going to be bad. Okay? If you don't square this piece of material up right, dimension wise, both wise, figure out where you're going to start from. Figure out where you're going to start from by your prints.
Yes, sir.
Right? Figure out the dimensions that you're going to have to use.
Go ahead.
And then you just go from one coordinate to another coordinate to another coordinate to another coordinate. This piece here is 6 inches 700 thousandths by 500. Okay? And there is 117 holes in this piece of material. And they all have to be the right size. So you have to figure out your tooling that you're going to use to pop these holes in order to keep the size that you want. But if you don't start out with the right dimensions and figure out where you're going to start from, the center lines, then you're going to wind up with a piece that ain't worth a nickel.
And all that work on.
And all that work, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's what it's got to be.
Wow.
And so you have to think ahead.
Yes, sir.
If you don't think ahead, you're going to run into problems.
And for you, I guess probably one of the things that probably has really helped you is you have a mathematical mind, it sounds like.
You have to.
And did you pick that up in your apprenticeship program, or working with the people you work with, especially the German guys, or were you already have a good head for math? I
always could figure things out. I always had a fairly decent math, but I took some math courses in the community college.
Problem for me too. Well, Charlie, thank you so much. I won't take any more of your time.
Hey,
but
I enjoy it.
I really appreciate it, and I think that personally, I think that you're an inspirational person, because you really are working hard at an age when most people wouldn't even think about it.
The other thing is, I'll leave you with this here. The main thing about machining is you got to work safe.
Yes, sir.
You've got to stay safe.
Yes, sir. And some of these tools you have spin at really high RPMs. If somebody had, like, say, this microphone cord, hanging down, and they happen to get caught in that machine, they might have their head go in that machine.
In IBM, and I got this from IBM, if you were one of these kind of people that wasn't safe, they got rid of you. They moved you someplace else. They wouldn't let you stay there. Safety was number one with them.
Yes, sir.
If you wanted to get canned, I'll tell you what, that was a good way to get it. Safety was number one.
Yeah, it is.
So thank you, Charlie Davis, for giving me some of your time. I know this was a long one, and I know that probably a lot of people tuned out midway because not everybody likes to listen to old guys talking, but personally I do, and I always really enjoy the time when I have a chance to talk to somebody who's so passionate and so talented about their work. And I hope that we'll have a chance to interview more awesome makers as this series progresses. I do have a few other videos that are kind of in the can right now, waiting to be be edited, which takes an awful lot of time, and I'm getting better at it, but just getting the videos from the camera to the computer is challenging to me as an old guy. So thank you all for being here. Please, if you're interested in these kind of videos, please follow along. There's a follow button somewhere on the YouTube thingy, and there's also a notification bell. So if that's something you're interested in, I would be honored to be on your playlist. So thanks to Charlie, thanks to the folks at Making Awesome who keep that nice space going, and thanks to each and every one of you.